पहले आपको सीधे लिए चलते हैं फ्यूचर ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी के कार्यक्रम में, जहां पर कपिल सिब्बल कुछ कह रहे हैं।
Now, here's a great contradiction. That's a contradiction between a paternalist university system and aspirational India. And you know that basically, if you look at really the world and you look at wealth, the wealth in the world is not owned by companies who have physical assets anymore. The richest of companies own no assets at all, whether it's Amazon or it's Uber or it's any company you see. The richest companies own no assets. So if the richest companies own no assets, then intellectual property is the heart of the wealth agenda of the global community. And intellectual property is created in the university system. In fact, if you look at numbers, you will find that there is something called in education the gross enrollment ratio. We call it the GER. The gross enrollment ratio is the ratio of the number of people who actually get into class 12 and then pass out of class 12 and go into the university system. And in the development world, the gross enrollment ratio is about 55 to every 100 students who pass out of class 12. And in 2009, when I was the HRD minister, our gross enrollment ratio was 12.4%. In other words, out of every 100 students who passed out of university, out of class 12, only 12.4% went into university. And of course, as you know, and Chief Minister here, Akhilesh ji would know, that lots of people actually don't reach class 12. So there are lots of dropouts before class 12, and of those who reached class 12, only 12.4% in 2009 went into the university system. Whereas in the developed world, it's 55%. Therefore, you will see that your gross enrollment ratio is directly related to wealth creation. Because wealth creation is at the university level, not at the school level. That's where intellectual property is created. That's why industry comes and picks up IP and then sort of transforms it into goods and services after going through procedures. So if your aspirational India is told that you cannot go out of college at 8 o'clock, and your aspirational India is told that you cannot use your mobile phone at 8 o'clock, there's an inherent contradiction there. How do you take your country forward if a paternalistic culture doesn't understand what aspirational India wants? And I see that happening around the world. I see that happening in India, more particularly. See what's happening in our university system. See what's happening in JNU today. In Jawaharlal Nehru University, they are told now all research students will have compulsory attendance of 75%. If you do not attend your classes, and these are research students, you will not be able to sit for the examination. Now, where in the world are research students supposed to attend classes? At 75%. So the result is that you are actually, there is a paternalistic my-baap culture that is forcing its agenda on aspirational India, and that's a contradiction that will have to be resolved if you want aspirational India to move forward. That's the second thought that I wanted to put before you. The third thought that I want to put before you, because many of these contradictions are irreconcilable. Some of them are manageable. Some of them are irreconcilable. Let's come nearer home to my own profession, because there's a lot of talk about master of the roster today. And let's talk about that. Now, what is the rule of law? The rule of law is meting out justice in accordance with procedures established by law. That's what rule of law is all about. Now, the Chief Justice of India says that I am the master of the roster. Or we believe he is the master of the roster. After all, he's the Chief Justice of India. We can't deny him that right, that he is the master of the roster. But that doesn't mean that he is above law. That also does not mean that he functions without any established procedures. That also doesn't mean that he can post a case to whichever bench whenever he likes, whatever case he likes. That doesn't mean that. So what is good for the rest of India is also good for him. Now, how do you reconcile that contradiction? You reconcile that contradiction to say, and for all of us to say, we accept you as the master of the roster, but please, master, have some processes put in place so that nobody suspects that you deny the very principle, the essence of which the Supreme Court of India stands for. That's all. That's all that we people want. Now, we see recently what has happened. And these are contradictions that can be managed. See what happened recently. 2 names were sent up to the government for elevation to the Supreme Court. And the government decided to pick one name and reject the other. First of all, the collegium made a recommendation on the 10th of January, 2018. That recommendation was on the file of the government. They did not take any action till there was, as you know, and I don't want to repeat all that happened within the court system. So when this matter came to a stage where it had to be dealt with, then at that stage the government sends back the file and holds one name, and a distinguished advocate belonging to my profession is elevated to the judge, and we are delighted about it because it's made history. For the first time, a woman advocate has been elevated to the Supreme Court, and we are proud of it. But what has it done to the system? What it has done to the system is established a precedent. And the precedent is that we will decide who to elevate and who not to elevate. Let's sort of look at it from a long-term standpoint. Supposing in Uttar Pradesh, the Chief Minister, the collegium recommends 35 names. Goes to the law minister, he looks at those names and he cuts out 10 names. And he sends back the file and says, okay, now of the 35 names, I cut out 10 names, I excise 10 names, you give oath of office to the others. The result will be that all those who the government does not like will be excluded, and all those who the government finds are okay for them will be included. What will be the result of that? The result of that will be that all advocates will curry favor with the government so that their names are included. Now, this completely is destructive of the system, and this can easily be managed. All that needs to be said is, to the government, you don't like 10 names, you first send the 10 names to us that you don't like. Because of the 25 names that you like, we have no problems. Of the 10 names you don't like, you send it to us. That's the collegium. If the collegium again recommends those 10 names, then under the law, the government has no right to refuse. The result is that the 25 names will be accepted, or of the 10 names, 1 or 2, where the collegium itself agrees with the government, will be excluded. So there'll be no problems at all. But nobody wants to manage this contradiction. The government doesn't want it, and somebody sitting there also doesn't want it. That's a real problem for the country. Now, let us look at another issue. This is a contradiction that cannot be resolved. That's the contradiction between the Hindutva agenda and the development agenda. It's a contradiction that cannot be resolved at all. Why do I say that? The Hindutva agenda wants a majoritarian culture to be accepted by all citizens of this country. Love jihad, ghar wapsi, control over the university system, targeting people, encounters as we are seeing them today. creating dissensions within society. Now, if you do that, the end result is that you won't have peace and tranquility. The end result would be that you won't have the necessary groundswell equanimity for the development agenda to move on. Now, you know that any development agenda, and I remember our dear Prime Minister, when he was not the Prime Minister, said that you gave Congress 60 years, give me 60 months, and I will show you what I can do for this country. And just the other day, he made a statement that nobody can do anything in 5 years. Nobody can do anything in 60 months. Because any development agenda to be taken forward needs a gestation period. And it'll take you years and years really to show progress. Now, you know that you cannot succeed on the front of the development agenda. You know that the only way to succeed is to put forward your Hindutva agenda. So, I remember, and this is very interesting, that Hindutva agenda started from day one. And I remember that when the Prime Minister went to Parliament, he placed his forehead on the floor of Parliament and he said that, look, iski maryada, main hamesha dhyan mein rakhte hue aage badhunga. And the first speech he made in Parliament, first speech that he made in Parliament on the motion of address of thanks to the address of the President, he said, he took 3 names. He said, there are 3 heroes in Indian history. One is Mahatma Gandhi, one is Ram Manohar Lohia, and the third one is Deen Dayal Upadhyaya. And he excluded Jawaharlal Nehru's name. Now, while he talked about Parliament being the temple of laws, he started his travel in the political, as a Prime Minister of India, with politics and divisive politics. Now, we know that divisive politics is not going to take this country anywhere, which is why our GDP is where it is, which is why we have jobless growth in this country, which is why scams are taking place in this country, which is why there is no capital in this country. And these are very serious issues. And therefore, as we move forward towards 2019, we see the Hindutva agenda overriding everything else. It is true of every election that we have seen in recent months. Now, I think that as a nation, we have to decide which is that agenda that we want. Certainly not an agenda which divides people. Certainly an agenda which looks towards sort of lifting people up from the bottom of the pyramid. That's the only agenda that will make India survive. So that's one issue which I think is irreconcilable. Now let me talk about another very significant issue, and also it deals with the Indian economy to some extent. I talked about the global economy. Well, let me talk about the Indian economy. 56% of our GDP comes from services. 56%. And around 23-24% of our GDP comes from the manufacturing sector, and about 18-19% comes from agriculture. But agriculture sustains 60% of our population. And the contribution of 56% of our GDP comes from about 3 to 4% of our population. So 3 to 4% of our population produces maximum wealth, and the majority of our population produces no wealth. That's the reality of India. That's why there is jobless growth. Because the services sector absorbs technology. Now, how do you deal with this? Unless you give encouragement to manufacturing and create jobs, you're not going to create wealth in this country where it is needed. Wealth is needed at the bottom of the pyramid. In 2017, the gap between the 1% rich people and 99% increased. 1% of rich people acquired 55% of the growth of wealth in this country, which was a year ago 45%. In other words, the gap between the rich and the poor is increasing. And you probably know that about 800 million people in this country earn less than 10,000 rupees a month. Imagine this, 800 million people means the population of Europe and the United States of America put together is 800 million, and they earn less than 10,000 rupees a month. That's a contradiction which has to be reconciled. We can't afford that to continue. And how do we reconcile it? Till we have systems in place which encourages manufacturing. Remember, we had the agricultural revolution, the green revolution, and then we jumped into the services revolution. We had no industrial revolution like Europe had. Now, that manufacturing revolution was possible in China because of a totalitarian regime. And because land is a commodity that is owned by the state, it's not privately owned. So what the Chinese did was they gave land free to business enterprises. And they gave the infrastructure free, and they said, you come and manufacture here and export as much as you like. So they built up an export economy which built up their reserves. And they put those reserves into development, and that's how they developed. But we can't do that. We don't have a totalitarian state. So we need to develop a new economic model to ensure that people have jobs. But it's difficult for people to get jobs because we can't afford to have technology in the leather sector and the textile sector to the extent that we wish to, because there we will lose jobs. So what do? And that's again a conundrum that we face. How do we manage that? Now that requires thinking. But what thinking have we seen in the last 4 years? We talk about digital India. But what is digital India? I was thinking about education. Now, there are huge contradictions in education as well. Because the real problem with education in India is we don't have teachers. That's really the link that's missing is teachers. Why don't we have teachers? Because we don't have enough professionally set up institutions to train teachers. Why is that? Because nobody is interested in setting up institutions to train teachers because there's no return on capital. And state doesn't have the money to invest. So the result is there are no teachers. You go to any school, you will find 90 students, 1 teacher. You will find absentee teachers. And no urban teacher who is in the urban sector of the economy wants to go to the rural area, just as doctors don't. So the result is you don't have teachers, good teachers. So the only way to deal with that issue is to have digital India. In other words, if you were to connect classes throughout the country with a digital network, you could have a teacher located in Delhi give a lesson to all our students across India, provided you're connected. In other words, you can solve the problem of absentee teachers through connectivity. And that's why I started my Akash project. That if we were to connect all our children through the Akash tablet, we could actually, through the digital network, give lessons to students even though there are no teachers there. That's a stopgap arrangement till we develop human resource. Now that's a contradiction that can be managed. But nobody wants to manage it because nobody has that sort of thought processes, that mindset. People are more interested in sending people to universities and have the ABVP sort of capture the university system than look at education. So digital India is not going to deliver at all. It will deliver to banks. It will deliver to big business enterprises because they love digital India. Because their transactions are quicker. For every transaction, they earn a commission. So for every transaction they earn a commission, the banks love it. Big businesses love it. Foreign companies love it. But a person who earns less than 10,000 rupees a month, what does he know about digital India and how does he need digital India? He doesn't have enough. You may have a Jan Dhan account, but he doesn't operate the account because he has no surplus capital. You need to operate an account if you've got money. But if you earn 10,000 rupees a month, what are you going to keep in the bank? So if you don't have anything in the bank, you don't need digital India. So 75% of our population, 80% of the population doesn't need digital India. They don't need smart cities either. What is a smart city? 40% of every urban city is full of pestilence. How do you deal with that? You have no garbage disposal system. How do you deal with that? These are contradictions of your Swachh Bharat. How do you manage that? You don't have a sewage disposal system, you don't have a garbage disposal system in any city, and you talk about Swachh Bharat. Now, these are contradictions that have to be managed. And they have to be managed by persons with a vision. Now, our democracy is like a car. Think of a car. Each of you have a car. Your constitution is the car. And the four pillars of your constitution, the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, and the media, are the four wheels of the car. But they're not properly aligned. The mechanic will tell you if your wheels are not aligned, it won't work. Your car will not run. So at the moment, the four wheels of that constitution are not aligned, of democracy are not aligned. And you have a driver who doesn't know how to drive. That's the greatest tragedy of India. And that's a contradiction in itself. Which you make a driver sit in a car and he doesn't know how to drive, you land yourself after 4 years where we are landed today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.